Today, let's take a closer look at Fomapan 200. I wanted to do some more film comparisons to Tri-X like I began earlier in the year. But to keep things consistent, rather than do them every now and then, I went ahead and got 49 different film stocks, everything I could get in 35mm from B&H and Freestyle. So unless they were out of stock, I got a roll of it. Now, if this part of the video seems familiar, it's because I'm using this portion of the video for all 49 of them rather than record it 49 times. So if you want to skip ahead to the H&D curves or the prints, time codes are right over here. For those of you that haven't seen this part of the video before, here's what I've done. So I wanted to use each film with the exact same shot, which is a headshot of me with a Kodak Gray Card Plus, which happens to have a red, blue, and green patch, a cyan, magenta, yellow patch, and then a dark and a neutral flesh tone. Then, with those shots taken, I bracketed every shot in third of a stop so that we can make sure we have a negative of equal shadow density to the base target film of Tri-X. Now, the reason I use Tri-X is because it's just been around for a long time and it's a very popular film. So it's a good base film to compare everything to. Then, once everything was developed, which was developed in D-76 at stock for the manufacturer's recommended time, I printed everything on Ilford using the exact same aperture, contrast settings, developer, and everything. The only thing I changed was my exposure time, and that was to make sure that I compensated for any base fog variation from one film stock to another. Other than that, everything was left the same so that we can have a comparison of just the qualities of the film. Now, there's going to be some differences in contrast, especially on the high end, and that's because the manufacturers getting their development time may not have used the same target that Kodak used for Tri-X, and that's okay. We're not looking at the overall contrast for everything. What we're really looking at is grain characteristics, tonality, how the film treats the shadows versus the highlights, that sort of thing. And we're looking at spectral sensitivity, thus the Gray Card Plus, rather than just a regular Gray Card. So we're going to go ahead and look at H&D curves, which if you saw one of my earlier videos on sensitometry, I like to use pen and paper and make my graphs. However, my wife was really ready to make sure I was done with this project. So she put everything into a spreadsheet for you all. So even though I don't like them, I want to show them to you thanks to her. Then we're going to go ahead and look at the prints side by side with the same print made from Tri-X. And from there, you can decide if you like the film and if you want to go and use it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the curves, and then we'll go to the prints. Once again, we have Tri-X in blue, and the red is our Fomapan 200. We have a very good straight line once we get past the toe. The toe is kind of a graceful curve. We may find that our blacks down in the deepest blacks are blocking up a little bit, but the rest of the tonality seems to have very good separation and a really good straight line. So let's go ahead and see what the prints look like to see if this bears out in reality. Here we have our Tri-X 400, and on this side our Fomapan 200. The first thing we can notice, this is a little bit less contrast. Just like our other films, that's controlled with our development time. In this case, it is a little underdeveloped. It is also not a 200 speed exposure. I am getting the same shadow density in the blacks down here as to the Tri-X and in the shadow portion of my forehead on both when this is rated at 160. So this is the shot exposed for 160. ISO instead of 200. Our spectral sensitivity, pretty much identical. In fact, it's actually identical. So we're getting good performance there. Overall impression, it is pretty good tonality, just needs a little bit longer in the developer. Now with the 100, I felt like it may have been a development time which was a little bit too long, maybe for Foma papers. In this case, who knows, maybe this is for Foma and the other is developed too long. Maybe the other's for Foma and this just isn't long enough. Either way, I don't know what metric they're using for what gamma, contrast index, or whatever Foma intends. I know what Kodak target is. I don't know what this one is supposed to be. Maybe this is typical. Either way, overall it's pretty good. I've got some good tonality in the flesh tone. I have good separation of tones pretty much through the whole thing. Just a little bit longer development time would be needed. All right, enough about that. Let's zoom in and look at the fine details to see how they differ there. Okay, when we look at this, the first thing we may notice is the grain. And while this is a 200 speed film, or in my case 160 speed film, I feel like the grain is actually larger than Tri-X 400. This is still a relatively sharp film. I feel like I'm still getting the same shadow separation, particularly in this area here, but it is a much rougher grain than I would have anticipated for a 200 speed film. Eventually I will compare this to other 200 speed films such as Cinestill or something like that, but yeah, it's a pretty rough grain. Here along the shoulder, we still have pretty good fine detail. We can still see the rough edge of the fabric as it sits against the lighter background, but we can see with the grain of the smooth background that it is bigger than Tri-X. Then when we get to the neck, we still have pretty good fine sharp detail in the collar. We have good separation and detail here in the stitching along the shoulder, and we have good detail in the skin and hair of my neck. So nothing to complain about there. It's relatively still pretty good. And here in the close-up of my face, we can see good gradation. We could probably get a little bit brighter skin tone in those really bright highlights along the bridge of my nose and the catch lights in my eye with that longer development time, but that's just a personal choice for what you want it to look like. Overall, it's pretty good. Nice grading in the midtones, good separation in the shadows, good sharp detail. So overall performance of this film, it's good. You're going to get a nice solid medium 200 to 160 for your film speed. You're just going to get a larger grain than I think you should get for a 200 speed film. Other than that, I think you can expect pretty good performance. Just fine tune your development time, test, and get it exactly where you want for your highlights. Other than that, I think you'll do pretty well with this stuff. All right, that's it for this week. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.